Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I'm making a podcast. You might know me from the writing I do on sixprizes.com or occasionally .deck.co.uk. I've top cut nationals in the past. I almost top cut the ECC. Big debate. We'll leave that for another day. And I want a couple little tournaments here or there. I'm also a big fan of podcasts, and I've never seen a Pokemon podcast before that really does what I'm looking for. I want a nice 20 to 30 minute slot, which I can listen to when I'm walking around, and it comes out every week. And that's what I'm going to be giving you today. I won't be doing any phone interviews because I don't think the quality's good enough. I'm just going to be giving you a little bit of discussion on a couple of topics which I think are pertinent. And in future weeks I will be bringing in extra people, but it's going to be proper interviews that I've done on the day in person. Now, the way we're going to do this, we're going to start off with a little bit of news every week, and then we're going to go on to talk about a couple of hot topics, and we're going to finish off with me trawling the forums, seeing things which I think are worth talking about. So starting off the news this week, it's all about the new set coming out in Japan. Some cards are starting to be leaked. One of these, there was a tiny little picture that we saw in a TV advert that has an Oddish. Now, I don't want to start people thinking too much too soon, but Oddish usually means Vileplume. Yes, we all know that Oddish also evolves into Blossom, but the trading card game has always really favoured Vileplume over Blossom. And although Vileplume doesn't always mean Trainer Lock, let's face it, it's an option. If you go all the way back to Hidden Legends, there was a EX Vileplume that had a one-sided Trainer Lock when it was active. And if you go back even further to Team Rocket, there was a Dark Vileplume which had Trainer Lock. The Undaunted Vileplume is just about to go out when we rotate in a couple of months' time. He could be coming back as early as Cities, or just after Cities, in our February set. Other cards that have been revealed include Escape Rope, which is basically Warp Point. Now, this does mean you're not going to be able to use those sexy Warp Points you've already got. Why have they changed the name? It's because ever since Black and White came out, we're going to trainer items, not trainers. That means everything must be an item. So our Gust of Wind becomes Pokemon Catcher, our Lost Mover becomes Crash Hammer, and Warp Point becomes Escape Rope. I was never a huge fan of Warp Point back in the day, but some people did like it, so we'll see how it works out. The other card that's been revealed is Shayla, who's one of the gym leaders from Black and White. This might mean we're getting supporters for all the gym leaders in Black and White, but as we had Volkner's Philosophy and none of the others, I wouldn't pin your hopes on it. Now, this is a very interesting card. What it allows you to do is search your deck for any trainer card. Now, we don't know what the translation is at the moment, whether that also includes supporters and stadiums, or whether it is just trainer item. But that's very interesting because it basically allows you to search for any card, effectively. If you want an energy, get yourself an energy search and use that. If you want yourself a Terrakion, get yourself a heavy ball. If you want a Dynamo, get yourself a level ball, etc. Now, this could have some use, because without Junk Arm, we're going to be forced to play a lot more 4-of trainers. We can no longer just play one copy and then Junk Arm when we need it. There's going to be no Junk Arm to do that with. I could see a few decks who are going to put 1-of trainers in and put Shayla in. Is definitely a possibility. And let's not forget, how many times have we used a Pont or a Juniper hoping to hit a single card? This guarantees us that card. On the flip side, however, how many times have you used Twins and really wished you could have got more than 2 cards? Is one card really going to be enough? And in the format we're in at the moment, everybody's going on about random receiver and your draw supporters. If you run Shayla, that could screw up your random receivers. This is very much a card that has potential for the future. I don't know how much of an impact it's going to make yet. The other big news this week was the theme decks, the Dragon's Exalted theme decks, the new set which is coming out on August the 15th. Everybody got very excited when it turned out the theme decks were Hydreigon and Garchomp. Not only that, but the Garchomp was the really good Garchomp that is seeing a lot of play in Japan with Altaria, and the Hydreigon is the really good Hydreigon which is seeing a lot of play with Darkrai, which is coming in a tin. All these good cards being made affordable. And then we got the news from Pokemon that in fact, although they are Hydreigon and Garchomp theme decks, and although the pictures we received did have the good cards in, these pictures are incorrect. It's not the good Garchomp, it's not the good Hydreigon, it's the other ones. Still cool, because kids still like Garchomp, they still like Hydreigon, but those people who thought they were getting these really good playable cards, not quite yet. We have got Zoroark, Zekrom and Reshiram in theme decks recently though, so I don't think we can really be too upset. And that brings us to the really big news of the moment, and that is US and UK Nationals. They're happening this week. US Nationals is obviously very, very important because it's the big one. You usually get somewhere in the region of 1,000 people, and we all know that the US players traditionally tend to do very well at Worlds and such. UK slightly less on the radar. I'm a little bit biased about this, being a UK player myself. I'm pretty darn excited. And that's going to be the main topic for this podcast today. I'm going to be going through a few issues for Nats. Now the first thing I'm going to do, and you should all thank me very much for this, I'm going to give you a list of what you need to take to Nationals, because we all rush around the night before or on the day trying to figure out what we need. Here's what you need. You need your deck. This might seem stupid, I have seen people turn up to tournaments without decks before. You need sleeves, and don't just take 60 sleeves. Re-sleeve your deck the night before and take some spare sleeves, because if you don't take spare sleeves, you are going to rip one, and then you're going to be up a creek without a paddle, so to speak. You're going to need dice or a coin. You're going to need a mat. You're going to need a deck box to keep your lovely deck in, although you shouldn't really forget that, what with taking your deck. And very importantly, you're going to need a deck list, and you're going to need your POP ID, preferably a few copies of your deck list. You may also wish to take some clothing that has special significance to you, or a mascot. Anybody who sees me at UK Nats will see me with my Mama Swine, because it wouldn't be Nats without my Mama Swine. That list again: your deck, your sleeves, including spares, some dice, your mat, a deck box, deck list, and POP ID. Now the good news for people in the US and the UK potentially is that there have been a lot of national championships that have already happened. So this gives us quite a lot of information and quite a lot of data that we can use to try and figure out what the play is. In Australia, Nationals was dominated by Darkrai, generally with Terrakion and Mewtwo, but it was actually won by Terrakion. In Belgium it was dominated by Zeals and again won by Terrakion. Don't get too excited, they're the only two wins I can see for Terrakion, at least the only two that stuck out. In Denmark, it was dominated and won by Darkrai Terrakion, and we saw the same thing in Mexico and in Norway. In Italy, we had a very varied top four, and it was again won by Darkrai Terrakion. In Finland, we actually saw a win for Darkrai Hammers, which might seem significant, but something I think is worth noting in Finland is that Isa Junton, my apologies for the pronunciation of his name, him of the Deck Out, the popular blog, he basically always wins Finland Nationals. He's won it 6 times now, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, it is a good deck, and yes, that deck has since been seeing a lot of play, but don't forget that that dude always wins Finland Nationals. So it might be a good deck, or it might just be that he's that darn good. We then got onto the two which really interested me. Germany Nationals, for me, is always very significant. It has a large player base, one of the largest in Europe. It also has a very competitive player base. So if you really want to see what's good in Europe, Germany is often the place to go for. And German Nationals was dominated and won by CMT, with Terrakion. Now CMT was a deck that was fantastic, and then kind of dropped off the radar, and recently it's been coming back. There was a winner box tournament in Aldershot recently in the UK, and it was exactly what it says on the tin. It was a tournament, you won a box of cards. This was won by CMT. Not only that, but there was another deck in the top 4 which also was CMT. It's coming back. It is coming back. And finally, in France, Darkrai Terrakion won out over 3 Eel Zone decks in the top 4. I say Eel Zone, I of course mean Zekeel, Zekrom, and Eels. So this brings me to my list of decks to watch. Now, I'm going to go through a couple others towards the end, but really, as far as I'm concerned, there are 4 main decks that you need to watch. I'm not saying these are the only decks you're going to face, but I am saying they're the 4 decks you need to be most prepared for. The first one of these is CMT, Celebi, Mewtwo, Tornadus. It's the deck I've just mentioned a second ago. And the good things about these is that it's fast, it can donk. It can very often do a turn 180 or a turn 160. Now we've got Tornadus EX. If you can get a DCE in play and get your Celebi putting a grass energy on as well, you're hitting for 100 on turn 1. That's going to kill your Shaymin, that's going to kill your Smeargle, that's going to kill your Sableye. And these are all Pokemon that are going to be played in their droves at Nationals. Even if it doesn't donk, you can be hitting for a turn 100, and there are a lot of decks that cannot come back against this. It also wins a Mewtwo war, and make no mistake when I say this, Mewtwo is still out there. Yes, Darkrai might be out here, yes, decks might not all be playing 2 Mewtwo, but I've won enough games recently by just sticking out a Mewtwo, shamaning energy on, and sweeping. I've also had that happen to me in decks when I thought I didn't need to run a Mewtwo. Let it be on the record here, Mewtwo is good, and Celebi Mewtwo Tornadus will take advantage of that. It's not all good though. Unfortunately, the way the format is at the moment, you're going to probably need Terrakion in your CMT deck. This makes it clunky and takes away some of the speed. Of course, you also have the option of running it without Terrakion. More on that in a minute. It loses to Eels. That's one of the reasons why you need the Terrakion. The problem with Celebi Mewtwo Tornadus is that generally Eels players are going to be playing 2 Mewtwo. That means if you prematurely start the Mewtwo war, they can win it, especially if they can Super Rod one back. Not only that, but your Tornadus and your Tornadus EX are going to get ripped apart by their Thunderous and their Zekrom. CMT is also very susceptible to a late game end. It's got no staying power, no self-generation if you will. You can end them down to 1 and sweep, and I've seen that happen against a lot of CMT players. Which leads me to the question about CMT, do you need Terrakion? And I'm actually going to say here, no, you don't need Terrakion. But you do need a way to beat Eels. I think CMT can go toe-to-toe with and beat Darkrai even if you don't have Eels in there, because you're going to be a little bit faster, because you're still 2-hitting Darkrai with Tornadus and they're 2-hitting you. However, Eels is a big problem. So maybe you do need Terrakion against Eels, but the priority here is really beating Eels, not necessarily sticking in a Terrakion. The second deck I think you need to worry about is Darkrai variants. Now this could be Darkrai Tornadus, Darkrai Mewtwo, Darkrai Terrakion, Darkrai Hammers, etc, etc. I'm going to lump them all in together here to save this going on approximately forever. Darkrai variants are fast. You will very often see a turn 2 Darkrai. If you're having a really bad day, you might see your opponent get a turn 1 Darkrai. The biggest thing that Darkrai can do is he can skew the prize war. Now I mentioned when I talked about CMT, about getting that turn 1 100 and about 2-hitting Darkrai while they're 2-hitting you. And that's technically correct. However, they're also 2-hitting Celebes on your bench. So when you take 2 prizes, they take 3. And this is the really big thing that makes Darkrai such a force in this format at the moment. He can get you skipping ahead on prizes as well as being fast. And he's got built-in acceleration. Dark Patch is awesome, especially with Junkarm in the format. You can be Dark Patching from turn 1, attaching extra energy all the time. In theory, you could be doing that 8 times a game. And Darkrai gives you variety. As I've said, it can be run with Tornadus, it can be run with Terrakion, it can be run with Mewtwo, it can be run on its own with just Hammers. There's a lot you can stick in with it. The bad news about Darkrai is we have a fantastic counter in Terrakion. Terrakion, 2 energy, as soon as they take a prize, you knock out that Darkrai. Now, the Darkrai can stick an Eviolite on, which forces you to have a plus power, which has saved people and may well save you or your opponent at Nats. But it's not something you can really rely on, because most decks with Terrakion will also be playing at least 2, if not 3 or 4 plus powers. And if you play Darkrai, there's going to be a lot of mirror matches. I've been playing a lot on PTCG recently, and Darkrai has been outnumbering every other deck on there. It's been coming out in droves to Battle Roads. If you've been going at tournaments, you know what I'm talking about. Darkrai's everywhere. The third deck I think you need to worry about is Eels. Eels has been around for some time and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It is consistent. It sometimes takes a turn or 2 to get up, but when it gets up, it is going. You're attaching energy from the discard, you don't need anything in your hand to do so. You pop a Sky Arrow Bridge out there, and you can be retreating a lot of your Pokemon, like Thunderous, like your Smeargles, completely for free. You can stick in a couple of Mewtwo's, and you have a big leg up in the Mewtwo war, because even if you can't find a plus power, that third energy is so much easier to find when you've got Eels on the bench. The other great thing about Eels is the sheer variety of attackers you've got. You've got Thunderous, you've got Zekrom, you've got Zekrom EX, you've got Mewtwo. And it's even not that difficult to put in a Terrakion. The problem with Terrakion is you cannot just bench him, because if you bench him, he's going to get gusted up using Pokemon Catcher, and he's going to get killed before you can do anything with him. You need to drop him and get him attacking there and then. And that's what Eels can do. You stick him down, you pop a fighting energy on him, you Dynamotor and electric energy from one of your Eels on the bench, and he's ready to go. The bad news about Eels is, it is donkable. You're running a bunch of 40 HP Dynamos, you're probably running Smeargle in there, I've donked a bunch of Eels decks, and I've seen people donk a bunch of Eels decks, and there's been a good few games where I would happily have donked them had I just gone first. Even if you're not donked, you can again be rushed. If they can knock out your Dynamo turn 1 and keep knocking out Dynamos and keep knocking out Eels, they can get a really big lead going. And this should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, don't play the 30 HP Dynamo, because that is stupid. Because Darkrai's around. If you play the 30 HP Dynamo, you won't do well and you will not get any sympathy from me. The last thing about Eels is that it can be very hard to beat fighting decks. You're going to need 2 Tornadus, you're going to need Eviolite, that might not be enough. Because generally you're going to be playing against things like Darkrai, like Mewtwo, like Tornadus again. And you're going to be trading 2-hit KOs, and then they're going to be rolling through your Eels. Now if you're playing Eels, I don't expect your opponent to put out a Tornadus EX to fight yours for pretty obvious reasons. They're weak to electric. My point is that there are a lot of options of taking out Tornadus, and just putting 2 Tornadus EX into your Eels list is not necessarily going to beat your fighting decks. Speaking of fighting decks, they're the last decks I really want to mention today. There's a lot of good things about fighting decks. They beat Eels, they beat Darkrai. Not always, not guaranteed, but you get a big advantage. You stick a bunch of experience shares in your deck, and you can very happily get Terrakion hitting for 90 every single turn. Pokemon gets knocked out, energy goes to Terrakion, attach a second, and you're doing 90, and you keep doing that turn after turn after turn. However, fighting decks are generally slow. They are not good against CMT, which is making a comeback. Tornadus EX is a brilliant card that can be teched into almost any deck, which, although not guaranteeing a win against fighting decks, certainly gives you a big leg up. And with a lack of acceleration, generally you'll be relying on experience share, and if somebody comes in with their crushing hammers and starts hitting heads, you are going to be in trouble very quickly. Now there are some other decks that I think do warrant a little bit of a mention. Firstly, Empoleon. It's been seeing a little bit of success. It's been hitting a few top 4s at Nationals, and Tommy Roberts, my good friend, got second at this at the Aldershot Winner Box tournament. It can be fantastic. Having said that, it gets wrecked by an early Tornadus EX. They'll be if your opponent can get a turn 1 Tornadus EX, they are killing Piplups every turn, and then they've got something brilliant with which to take out your Terrakion. It can struggle to 1-hit KO anything a lot of the time, but a lot of decks will struggle to 1-hit KO either Empoleon or Terrakion, and they cover their weakness fantastically well. So if you find something that can 1-hit KO your Empoleon, that's where your Terrakions come in, and vice versa. One of the big advantages is that it doesn't need EXs, so you are trading 1 prize for 2 prizes a lot of the time. Can be successful, I would be slightly wary. Vileplume variants you should be aware of. There was a lot of hoo-ha when VVV, Vanillux Vileplume Victini, took 3 top cut spots, going 7-0, 6-1, 6-1 at the French Nationals. All 3 of those decks then went out in the first round of top cut. Because they're hard to set up, they're easily texted against, and they are terrible in best of 3. If somebody puts an Espeon in their deck, you will lose almost certainly, because you're hitting 40 or 80 a turn, and they will probably be hitting a lot more. The fact that they're hard to set up can also lead to problems in that you can be rushed. If they can take out all your Oddish before you get set up, if they don't put your twins in, then you are running into problems. And going back to that best of 3 thing, it is not that hard a lot of the time to beat slow decks in best of 3, because you don't even need to beat them. You lose a slow game 1, you get ahead, having taken at least 4 prizes in game 2, wait for it to go to time, win in sudden death. I'm not encouraging this, I'm not saying it's the way you should play, but I'm saying that is a lot of the time how you can beat these Vileplume decks. You don't actually have to win the game, you have to have taken more than 4 prizes when time is called in the second game for that one to count and to give you the win, and then you're going to win in sudden death. I don't know for a fact, but I am willing to bet that's what happened to these VVV decks in France. And finally, Durant. One of my friends put on Facebook recently, I'm going to play Durant at Nationals. Don't. It had its time, it was good, I lost to it. It ruined me in top 8 of London Stakes after having beaten me in the final round of London Stakes. I lost 3 games in a row that day. It was a good deck. But time you build in Darkrai, Landorus, Tornado CX, and the fact that they're generally going to start 170 HP basic, which is incredibly donkable, and it's not good. So that leads to the question of, what's the play? My guess, Eels with Terrakion. Could be wrong, nobody might play it, could be terrible. But it's consistent, it's not going to get wrecked by N. Terrakion fits in nicely and takes care of Darkrai, and people are expecting it less and less. People say it loses to Darkrai. People say it loses to fighting decks. That's why it's Eels' time to shine. And if I wasn't so dreadfully opposed to running multiple 40 HP Pokemon in my deck, I'd probably run it myself. But I'm not going to. So I don't know how much of an endorsement that really is. I'm going to finish off my thing about Nats with a couple little tips. Before you get to Nationals, play something you're familiar with. People often do well at tournaments with decks that a lot of people don't think are that good, and the reason is they know what they're doing. They've tested. They've got a list which is good, and they know the matchups. Play something you're familiar with and test a lot, and you will see huge improvements in your results. Last thing, don't make last minute changes to your deck. I tried this a couple years ago in my first ever Nationals. First time I'd made a really good deck. It was for Alligator Lantern, and I sat there the day before Nationals and I thought, Entei Raikou Legend. This is going to win me games. It didn't win me games. I went 4-3 on the day, and all of my 3 losses can be attributed to putting down Entei Raikou Legend when I didn't know what I was doing. Now admittedly, had I won those games I would have played against better players who would have smashed me, but that's not the point. I put it in, I didn't know what I was doing, and it was very, very bad. When you're playing, be calm. Don't get intimidated by big names. The amount of people I've seen lose to good players, in quotation marks, when games they really shouldn't have, and a lot of the time it's just because they get intimidated because, oh, I'm playing this dude who did well at Worlds last year. Doesn't have to be that way. And don't give up. If you're playing in single game especially, don't give up. Just play it out. You never know what might happen. In my second round at Nats last year, I was playing Donphan. I'd lost 2 Donphan and a Phanpy. I played no recovery cards. I had 1 Donphan left. And I managed to bring it back. My girlfriend who was judging at the time walked past me during that game. Wasn't judging my game, of course. And I gave her the look of, sorry love, I've lost this one. And I managed to bring it back. If that was people who tend to scoop, they would have scooped that game. Just happened quite well. Know your time in best of 3. Know what the time is. Now, I don't know exactly what the rules are with clocks and such. I've never been told exactly. I've been told conflicting reports. But if you are allowed access to the time, make sure you share it with your opponent. Be nice. But if you are allowed access to the time, make sure you use it. Make sure you know what the timing is. If it's a slow game and you're losing and you need to make a comeback in subsequent games, then scoop and go to the next game. And finally, to finish off our Nats talk, have fun. Nats is fun. Nats is fantastic. And you need to treat it as such. You're there with friends, do some trading, it's a big tournament, it's all fun, you can learn new stuff, you're playing this game that you love. Don't go there and end up going 4-3 and whiffing cut and getting miserable, because I'd have a fine one to talk, so I probably will, to be fair. But it's fun, and you're there with your mates, and it's the biggest tournament of the year and the most exciting tournament of the year. And just remember to have fun doing so. Now, as I said at the beginning, we're going to finish off with a little bit of forum gossip. Now, I'm pretty much running as long as I wanted to with this podcast, so I'm going to be very, very quick. I've got 2 topics for you. The first one, play points. Is 10 too many? Saw people on forums today saying that 10 play points is too onerous. Lots of people have their first tournament at Nationals, and I can relate to this, because back in 2010 I'd been to a couple little battle roads that I didn't really know what I was doing, and my first real tournament was Nationals. Had there been a play point requirement, I would not have been able to play, and I probably wouldn't have got as ridiculously into the game as I am now. The other thing it does is it forces you to go to other tournaments, to travel, to pay the entry fee, etc. People in the US might have free entry to tournaments, but in the UK, except for Nationals, we don't. We pay for our tournaments, and we pay for our gas, and we pay for our lodgings, and we pay for our food. And some people don't want to travel around to these tournaments. And actually, trying to get these 10 play points can be a complete pain. I know people who have made trips out to tournaments they didn't really want to go to purely so they met the play point requirement, and that just seems almost unfair in a way. But I can see the flip side. Because registration at both years I've been to has taken a very long time. If you're going to have 10 play points to turn up and play, then when you turn up, you're going to have a valid ID. You're going to have play points, and your profile is going to be up to date. I imagine registration this year is going to be a lot quicker, and the tournament's going to run much more smoothly. To be honest, play points doesn't affect me very much because I'm always going to have these play points because I go to far too many tournaments. But I think there isn't certainly an argument to say 10 play points is a little bit too onerous. Having said that, it's better than qualifying through championship points. The other topic, and going back to that very quickly, Tom Dolezal. Now I'm sure that's a bad pronunciation of his name, my apologies. He's a dude who famously only turns up to nationals in the US. Doesn't play tournaments, turns up to nationals, somehow gets an invite every year from just going to nationals. Now, I don't know the man, I've never talked to him, and I have no idea what he's doing this year. He's actually set because he got top 4 at Worlds last year, so he's got his invite all sorted. But when there's people who don't want to play during the year and then can turn up to nationals and get an invite to Worlds, I don't know if that says something. And finally, Espeon. People are talking to forums about should you play Espeon. Now this completely depends. If you play against an Exalgor Vileplume deck, or if you play against a Vileplume Victini deck, with Vanillux of course, you're going to want Espeon because it turns it from an almost guaranteed loss into an almost guaranteed win. But it's very possible you'll face one of these at the most as you go through Swiss. And if you face one of these at the most, you're giving 2 slots in your deck for an Eevee and an Espeon for something which is going to help you in one game. And to do that, you're taking out 2 cards that could help you in every other game. That 4th catcher, that 4th dark patch, that extra energy, that extra basic Pokemon that could stop you getting donked. I would think very, very carefully before you put it in. Having said that, if you end up facing more than one of these, you are going to wish it was in there. Now, you could run Unknown Cure instead, but don't. It works once. You're not going to be able to search it out that well. It's just not worth running. It's going to buy you 1 turn of attacking, and that's it. If you're going to do it, run Espeon. And I'm afraid that is all we've got time for on PTCG Radio today. I hope you've listened. Please tell your friends, because if people don't listen, I'm plainly going to get bored and stop doing this, and it's actually quite fun. Now, I've set up an email address just for this. It's ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, and if you want to find me on Twitter, it is @thewossy, THEWOSSY, @thewossy. Send me any comments you've got, things that I could improve, things I should include next time, questions, or anything that you want me to talk about. And please tell your friends, because otherwise I'm going to get bored and stop doing this. I probably need a cheesy outro to this, don't I? You've been listening to PTCG Radio.